Is it possible to recover from parental abandonment? I was abandoned by my mother when I was 12 years old, and you can imagine how devastated I was by that experience. It completely shattered my entire world. The impact of that experience on my life was absolutely devastating, and the suffering lasted for many, many decades. In this video, I'm going to be answering the question, how can you heal from parental abandonment? I'll be sharing my experiences of things that I felt on my journey to recovery and how I negotiated my relationship with my mother and how I came to a place where healing felt as if it had happened. My hope for you is that if you are experiencing the suffering of parental abandonment, that somehow in hearing of my experience, it helps you to understand perhaps why the parental abandonment has impacted you so adversely. And also maybe it will help you to think of ways that you can take your healing forward. So join me in the Spirit Spa Sanctuary, where we'll be examining the question, how do you heal from parental abandonment? I'm going to be answering 5 questions that were posed to me after I shared my video, The True Story of My Breakdown. And the link for that will be below if you haven't already watched it. But the 5 questions are, did you and your mother recover your relationship? How did the abandonment impact you? Why did she leave your father? Have you forgiven her? And if so, how did you forgive her? So let's begin with, did me and my mother recover our relationship? It's a really tough question, isn't it? Because how do you recover a relationship after abandonment? And actually, what does it mean to recover a relationship? Does it mean that you go back to having a completely normal relationship where there are no scars from the abandonment experience? Or does it mean that you manage to find a way through the scars and find a way of actually sort of managing and recreating a new type of relationship between you and the abandoning parents? For me, I would say that there has been some form of recovery in my relationship with my mother, but that hasn't happened easily and it didn't happen quickly. It has probably taken the best part of 40, if not almost 50 years. And I think that very naturally leads me into the question about how did the breakdown impact me? Well, as you can imagine, it impacted me in, it was completely devastating. I didn't know it was happening. I didn't know that my mother was leaving. It all happened very suddenly and very out of the blue. So it was a completely traumatic experience for me. And I remember in the moments or the seconds after seeing her leave, I just had this kind of internal shattering, which was absolutely devastating, and I really have genuinely spent most of my life since that point trying to put those pieces of myself back together again. Now, recovery really didn't happen until very recently, I think, between me and my mother, whilst we were still in a relationship, and she actually did return to the family home a period after she actually left. But as you can imagine, the relationship just wasn't the same. My feelings towards her, as I'm sure you can imagine, were full of disdain, full of hatred, full of anger, full of suffering, full of immense betrayal. And I think towards my mother, I think the two core emotions were like rage and disdain. I was just so like completely disgusted with her. And I sort of stayed in the energy of that disgust for years and years and years. And it would manifest itself in kind of interesting ways where we might be having like a really simple, trivial disagreement about, I don't know, what can I think of? Let's say, for example, something about like maybe putting the bins out, and there would be just maybe some kind of friction or conflict, tiny, inconsequential conflict about putting the bin out. And it could erupt into a massive row that tended to have the same script all the time. Both of us saying the same things over and over again that we'd been sort of saying to each other for years. And it normally always was around me throwing it in her face that she had abandoned me, and why could she abandon me, and how could she abandon me, and her always going into some kind of really highly defensive answer about that, and like not denying that she had abandoned me, because obviously she couldn't deny that, but always trying to sort of minimize the suffering that it had caused me, or just like a diminishment of the suffering that it had caused me. And the problem was that it was kind of, the suffering was compounded because there was the initial suffering of the abandonment, but then there were the years and years and years and years after that where my suffering was diminished and my reality of the experience was kind of rejected as well. So I ended up with kind of like, multiple layers of wounding and scarring around the abandonment experience. There were many times when I had friends or other members of the family who would, just say to me, Karen, just let it go, just let it pass, it was, so many years ago now, just let it go. But the problem was that I couldn't let it go, partly because I didn't feel that my, sorry, I'm just stepping over a great big stile there. I didn't feel that I had my experience and my emotions fully heard and truly respected. And I think until that happened, I was never going to be able to sort of heal and recover from the experience. And the other part of it was that I just had this nagging question that I just couldn't get out of my head or my heart. And I sort of had this sense that until I actually knew the answer to this question, I was never ever going to be able to move beyond the experience. And the question, it's not a difficult question to imagine, but it's the question of why. Why did you leave me? I just could never get an answer as to why my mother had left me. And of course, what I had done was completely blamed myself. If you're a 12-year-old girl and your mother leaves you, then obviously you're going to presume that it's because your mother doesn't love you, that your mother doesn't like you, that your mother doesn't think that you're a person worthy of her presence and care and support and love. So I had really swallowed these beliefs that she didn't love me, she didn't like me, and therefore I was a very, unlikable person. And I had really, swallowed that into a place of incredible low self-esteem. But I just had this absolute compulsion that until she gave me the answer to the question, why, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to stop punishing her, because I can promise you that throughout all of the decades where I was really in a strong state of suffering, I was really doing an incredibly good job at punishing my mother at every single opportunity I could possibly find to sort of, dig the knife in and remind her of this terrible thing that she had done to me. And it was just, we were just going round and round and round in circles for years in this pattern of these arguments erupting, me constantly, screaming at her for the fact that she'd left me, demanding answers, her kind of trying to be ultra defensive about the experience and very much diminishing the experience. But eventually, after many, 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 many difficult years, she did give me an answer. And I'm not going to share the answer here because that's her story, and it's absolutely not for me to actually share her story. But I think the interesting question is, did it help me knowing her reason why? And it's quite interesting, really, because it kind of left me in an interesting place, because on the one hand, it did help me. It helped me understand why she'd left my father, but it didn't really help me understand why she'd left me as well. It's kind of like I was very much, well, maybe you should have taken me with you if you wanted to leave him. But yeah, so it didn't really help me too much. So I was left in this very interesting position of, finally, after years, I actually had my answer. But did it create an instant inner healing? It created a softening. It created a space where I, not instantly, but over a period of time, came to, how shall I say it? It was almost like there was a change in the dynamics of the relationship, where we had been stuck in this sort of child and, hurt child and abandoning mother dynamic for so many years. I was able to really kind of sort of step back and think about my mother as a woman and what she had gone through or felt that she had gone through. And it wasn't my place to kind of judge that or criticize that in any way, shape or form. It was her story. It was nothing to do with me, really, that part of it. And so as I began to kind of separate myself and my mother, as we were at that point in time, separate us away from the child and the mother that had left all those years ago, what actually happened then was that I was able to begin to return my attention to the suffering and the emotions that were still left within me. I had the answer why, but I still had emotions that I needed to heal. So what did I do about that and with that? I needed space for the emotions to come up, and almost it was as if I was allowed to have the emotions for the first time. They'd always been denied or squashed or diminished or rejected. And I'm not saying that at that point in the time, my mother was able to hear my emotions at all. I don't think I even, at that point, I don't think I even tried to have those emotions kind of met by my mother, if you like. I think I tried that so much and it hadn't worked. I'd kind of moved beyond that. And actually, I think I also realised that I'd got to a point where it was never going to be my mother that was going to be able to help those emotions. It was always going to have to come from within me and for me. And I think that was a really big transition for me when I realised that I could scream at my mother all I like, but she couldn't do that inner healing for me. I was the one that had to do it. And I guess that was kind of really the crux of my nervous breakdown. In the heart of my nervous breakdown were those unresolved emotions, the rage, the shame, the hurt, the suffering, the disdain, the disgust for my mother and for myself. And it's the journey of recovering from my nervous breakdown that has helped me heal those very, very painful childhood emotions and experiences. I have some really kind of core methods that I have used to help me recover from my breakdown and therefore recover from those experiences. Primarily, walking was one of the first methods that I used. It was very, very short walks to start with, getting longer and longer over a period of time. But there was immense, when I look back on those walks now, I realised one of the core emotions that I was actually healing at that time was grief. I had just had so much grief around what I had lost. You know, I'd lost a healthy, happy relationship with my mother. I'd lost happy teenage years. Not that anybody necessarily has happy teenage years, but I'd lost the potential of having those. My adult life in my 20s and 30s was pretty much a mess. You know, I was a mess. I was all over the place doing all sorts of things that were not helpful to my well-being. And I can really trace that to the inner suffering of the abandonment experience. And then eventually, to come alongside the walking was the writing, which began as journaling and has now turned into, much more than that, and me, pursuing a PhD in creative writing, where I actually specialise in trauma and creative writing and the healing process. So it's really taken me on an unexpected journey that there is absolutely, no way I could have predicted that. And that's something that I say to you in terms of your own nervous breakdown recovery. If you begin to work with it, and if you begin to listen to the inner voices of guidance, if you answer that question, if I was to love myself today, what would I do? And you work authentically with your nervous breakdown, very gently and very slowly, it can take you into a place of great healing for the deeply unresolved emotions that you carry within you. I've done a huge amount of personal development on my own and with others. Talking is an incredibly important part of the healing journey, especially if it's with somebody who actually gives you space to explore your emotions, share your emotions, who respects and listens to them and gives you space to actually feel them as you need to without diminishing them. And I am actually going to be doing another video on the importance of testimony, the importance of having your story heard and respected and also witnessed, because that has been an incredibly important part of my own recovery journey. So where are my mother and I at now? Many years later. Have I forgiven her was one of the questions. Such a good question, isn't it? And the whole notion of forgiveness is quite a massive topic. I think I can honestly say that there is a part of me that will never forgive her. I think I have to be really honest about that. I think there'll always be the incredibly hurt child inside me that could probably quite easily flip into the rage and the disdain about the experience again. But that's not all of me now. That used to be, let's say that used to be like 98% of me. I would say now that that's probably just like, probably about, 2 to 5% of me. And the rest of me has kind of just come to this acceptance. My mother and I are, cracking on now, I'm getting older, she's getting older. And, sometimes it's okay to just get to a point where you can accept things that happened. You can't change them. You don't have to necessarily forgive them, but you don't also have to bring the destructive emotions into the relationship all of the time as well. And I think most importantly, what has been the most important thing for me in terms of recovering the relationship with my mother and healing the emotions was actually me being able to really care for and love the 12-year-old girl that was left. In the end, it became so much more about my relationship with her than my relationship with my mother. me being a mother to her, me hearing her emotions, me hearing her experiences, me witnessing them, me caring for her, me loving her, me soothing her, me nourishing her, to make sure that she knew that I, the adult part of her, really understood her suffering. And so I think that that's such an important part of the healing process, is to remember that sometimes it's not always about the person that's caused you suffering. It's about the suffering that you carry within yourself and how you heal that for yourself and within yourself. And you can see that I'm by a field that has been freshly harvested. The combines have been out in this field all week, working through the night as well. And to me, that's quite symbolic. You know, we're moving into the autumn now. Autumn is a time of release, of letting go of anything that doesn't serve us anymore. But it's also a time when new seeds are planted. And so I think for you, if you're actually, still very much stuck in the suffering around parental abandonment, maybe use this season that we're coming into, this season of harvesting, of thinking about, well, what do you need to let go of? What can you let go of? What emotions do you need to let go of? What can you do to work with the wounded child within you to help them heal the emotions that you're still carrying and that are still weighing your life down? And then I also think, well, what new seeds do you want to plant? For this coming year, what new seeds of healing and recovery do you want to plant for that wounded child within you? Don't worry too much about the person that caused the suffering or abandoned you. Really just think about that child. What is it that they need? And ask them the question, if I was to love you today, what could I do for you? But I also think you could ask yourself in this season of harvesting is to just kind of look back on your life, because if you have experienced abandonment, honestly, you are probably one of the strongest people that you know. You've probably had immense resilience. You've had to navigate immense suffering, immense betrayal. You might have had all sorts of issues in relationships and work life, and there will be so many ways in which your abandonment will have adversely impacted your life. And so one of the things that I would really encourage you to do is to sit down and ask yourself, well, how have I been absolutely amazing in this experience of abandonment? Because when I think about what I survived and how I survived, I can look back and think, well, do you know what? I think I'm quite amazing. Not wishing to be completely arrogant about it, but do you know what? When you've suffered, when you've had a really massive abandonment, betrayal experience, and you manage to carry on with life and survive life, well, you know what? I think you need to give yourself a great big pat on the back as well. So yes, think about, what does the inner child, the wounded child, need your help with now? But actually, what can you also celebrate about you in your resilience, in your ability and capacity to have survived a very, very, very difficult experience? So I have a writing prompt for you. And there's two prompts, actually. The first one is, what does my wounded inner child, the child who was abandoned, what do they need from me in order to take their next steps towards healing and recovery and feeling well again? Just take a few minutes to maybe journal on it, maybe just walk and think about it, or maybe just sit very quietly and just ask, what does this wounded inner child need? Just one gentle thing. And keep asking, what's the next one gentle thing that this wounded inner child needs in order for me to start feeling well and happy again, and to let go of any of my difficult emotions related to my experience of abandonment? And then the next prompt is, I want you to think about resilience. And I want you to think about celebrating your resilience. I want you to think about harvest. I want you to think about release and letting go. And I want you to make a list of all of the incredible ways that you have been amazing at surviving your abandonment experience. See if you can just find 10 ways in which you have been incredible in your survival. And then when you found 10, see if you can find another 10, and then find another 10, and then find another 10, because I think it's probably highly likely that you could come up with an incredible list to remind yourself of how incredibly strong, brave, courageous, and resilient you have been. How are you going to celebrate yourself for that? What are you going to do to celebrate the fact that you have been so incredibly resilient? If you have any further questions that you would like to ask me in relation to this video, the issue of parental abandonment, the importance of telling your story, please do leave them in the comments below or email me at karenpackwood@gmail.com and I'll record. If you've enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe to the channel. But also just to know you that I do have a new feature with the channel, which is a buy me a coffee feature. So if any of you feel called to buy me a coffee by way of a thank you for taking the time to record these videos for you, I would very much appreciate it, because I always enjoy a nice cup of coffee. So thank you very much, and you'll see the link before that in the description box below. So I'm Karen Packwood. This is the Spirit Spa, an online sanctuary dedicated to supporting you if you're in the early stages of recovering from a nervous breakdown, helping you to understand why the breakdown happened so that you can work out your next natural steps towards rebuilding a flourishing life for yourself. And I'm wishing you a very peaceful day.